Okay. Welcome to the second hour of MindShifters Radio. And today is Monday, and it is January the 27th, 2025. And we are glad that you have joined us here on Needle and on MindShifters Radio. And I am going to hand the phone over to Michael. And pardon me, I need to get the headset out for him. All right. If it's not technical difficulties with Needle, it's technical difficulties with me.
Well, Jeanie was out getting some errands done and just this minute walked in the front door. So excuse us catching up. There's a lot on our plate these days. A lot of really wonderful stuff and some challenges. Fortunately, one of the biggest challenges we've had recently, which is that of our son Ryan having gone through a major brain surgery, is looking like it's all on the upside, and Ryan's doing great. He's moving forward. He's got some physical therapy yet to do, but he's on the right side of it. And so thank you to everyone who's offered support and sent love, and also offered the support to help to handle some of the financial challenges that it presented. So delighted that you're here. Appreciation in you being here. And I'll just open the possibility for questions. If you're out there in listener land, we'll start off with an opening for questions before I launch into some of the material that I'm planning to cover today. So if you're out there and you're listening in Needle, if you've gotten a notice, and we're working through the kinks of this, if you've gotten a notice in your text and you just hit the text, that takes you to a web page where you can listen to the show. But in order to actually interact through the app, and you don't need to use phone minutes anymore now that we've got this app, which is wonderful. If you open the app, once you get the email, rather than clicking the link and going to a web page, you open the app. And then in the app, there's a button that says call. Click it, look down, and below that, it'll say call or call again. And that will put a hand up, and I'll know that you want to talk to us. And so we're delighted that you're here and looking forward to seeing what's going to unfold. And again, if you have any questions before I launch into something, please raise a hand. And giving a moment for a hand to go up, and it looks like we don't have a hand, so then let's just go for it. And my topic today, what I was planning to talk about, or am going to talk about, is a question. What is your tyranny? And tyranny I would define as anything that comes from any form of hostility or fear. In other words, what doesn't come from your human life becomes part of what the ancients called the mind of man, or carbon-based memory. And carbon-based memory is going to present constructs that have this amazing ability to turn everything backward. Let's explain a little bit about what that means before we step into a deeper look. So when you think you're looking through your so-called body's eyes, you're looking at a picture that your mind has told you is a picture of something out there. Now that's the number one deception of the human mind. That's why in the ancient teachings, they spoke about the mind of man as opposed to what they called the mind of Christ. And the mind of Christ was not a religious idea. It wasn't the name of a man. It wasn't about somebody else's mind. It was about the mind of love being active in you. When you go through a power person experience, and this is kind of the the core for everyone of what a lifetime's work is about. And that is, whatever the tyranny of your power person was, and most of us have, I actually have never run into anybody who did not have any power person dynamics in them. And you'll remember that there are three things required in order for a power person dynamic to become active in the human mind. It's usually between a parent and a child, though not always. And I repeat this often because you got to hear it enough times for your brain to be able to feed it back to you, for carbon-based memory to be able to feed you back the truth about what's going on when you're looking at a projection in your mind and blaming somebody else. So when we think, when this power person dynamic is taken on, it runs the rest of that person's life. And again, it's usually between a parent and a child, though not always. The three things that happen to instill the power person dynamic, when these three things are true, the energy field of the child opens wide, and it's usually a child, although it can happen to an adult too, under enough stress. The field opens, and everything in the environment is just sucked right in. We actually had the thing that inspired me to talk about this today is we've been watching a series called Suits. Really interesting series. It's about lawyers in New York City, and it's really quite well done. There's some powerful healing moments in it as well, which is pretty profound for a TV series. And thank you for Julie Matthews for turning us onto it. But last night's episode was really interesting because it played out the power person dynamic perfectly. There's a guy who's a full-grown, big tough attorney, years in practice, biggest firm in the city, ultra powerful. And he's going through a crisis with a woman. And I mean, it just so profoundly demonstrated the power person dynamic, and it had him go back. He's working with a therapist, and it's probably been about, 15 episodes of this TV series that he's been resisting looking at it. And he's been seeing this psychiatrist, but no, we don't go. We're not going to go. We're not going to go. We're not going to go there. But finally, there's enough stress that he breaks down and he has to talk to his therapist about it. And it literally goes back to the precise thing that seems to be the problem out there today, according to his perception. It's the very thing that happened to him when he was a kid and a girl cheated on him, and he's watching her kiss this other boy, and he's so in love, and he's so infatuated. But it just graphically played out the power person dynamic, and and he goes back to see a psychiatrist to process through it, to look at it. And again, the three things that get instilled, it didn't actually go back to the power person dynamic, but which would have been original, probably a root event with mom or dad. He's this guy in the film or the TV series has talked about mom a little bit, but that hasn't really come into the picture. But it does show the replicated mind reproducing from its content the same experience, the why is this happening to me again experience. In fact, when we were watching it, I looked at Jeanie, as I do every once in a while. We're watching something. Said, well, there's a book about that. I wrote the book. Why is this happening to me again? Which is really, why am I doing this to myself again? Because perception is a construct, and it comes out of content in the mind. What are the three things that cause this power person dynamic to be instilled? One, the power person has more power over the child than the child does. Two, the power person is not functioning as a human being, is not functioning as love. And three, the child perceives it as survival. When that occurs, the energy field of the child opens wide and literally is like a vacuum cleaner and just sucks everything up from the environment. Every energy in the environment, spoken, unspoken, seen, unseen, doesn't matter. Every energy in the environment goes into the unconscious of the child. In the future, Whenever that power person dynamic is resonated, there will only be 3 behaviors possible for that person. And the level of stress that they're under will determine which of the 3 behaviors, and I mean a whole lifetime of behaviors, the level of stress one is under will be determined by which or what level of stress they're under. So when there's little or no stress, we will tend to function out of what we call our normal personality. We'll do whatever we did to get along with our power person. When stress starts to build, we'll shift out. People will often call this multiple personality, because we'll shift out of that and become unrecognizable, because now we flip into doing what we did to resist and survive with our power person. Totally different personality. And then the third level of stress, when one's ultra stressed, they'll move into doing, the automatic decision system will kick into their minds, and they'll do whatever they did to resist and survive with their power person. So they're the 3 levels of behavior. The energetic dynamics that are taken on by the child are just data in the mind. Now, next thing to grasp, the mind has this amazing ability. Actually, we've got a good metaphor for it, so it makes it understandable. You've got a TV set. But you know something? If you were able to go into the back of your TV and go into all the wires and all the transistors, if you had an old TV, all the tubes, all the resistors, all the capacitors, if you were able to go in there, you would not find a picture or a word. All you would find is data. And your television set has this amazing capacity. It's the same one the human mind has. It turns data into pictures. And so if you have a particular power person dynamic, and I've made note of a few of them. Let's say one person's power person dynamic might be to prove that everyone is wrong and cannot be trusted. So they had a power person who could not be trusted and was always lying to them. It might be, I'm weak and helpless. I don't know what to do. It's hopeless. I'm confused. That's another power person dynamic I see very commonly. Another is, you know, I filled the space with my voice to block out the truth. In other words, I talk in order that I don't have to listen. That's a power person dynamic. Another I've witnessed is where one tyrannizes themselves by substituting their past perceptions for the actuality of the moment. And then they tyrannize others by acting as if the people in the present moment are actually inflicting that tyranny on you. You know, if you ever had someone say, why did you do that to me? And you scratch your head and you go, what are you talking about? And they said, well, you did this. And you were like, wait a minute, that never happened. Well, yes, it did. I witnessed it. I saw you do it with my eyes. Here's where you have to break understanding with the world. You have never seen anything with your eyes. Eyes are literally, pardon me, energetic devices. Excuse me, I had just taken some water and inhaled it. So eyes are energetic devices. They're literally antennas. And they bring information carried on light waves into the brain. And, you know, the world tells us that we see things through our eyes. We've been told that lie all our lives. The truth is, you've never seen anything through your eyes. There is nothing outside of that you see through your eyes. The eye is a one-way valve. Yes, information comes into it. But in the same way that you couldn't go to the back of your TV, let's say you've got an antenna on the roof, and you go to the back of the TV and you pull the antenna off and you look inside the wires, can you look up through the antenna out into the world? No, that would be ridiculous. You can't look out through the antenna called the eye. But information comes in, and according to what is resonated in your mind will generate a picture. We call that picture seeing, as though we're actually looking out through the eye at what's going on in the world. But the trick is that the picture is actually painted on the inside of our eyeballs, metaphorically. You've never seen, you never will see anything with your eyes. But if there's a power person dynamic in you, and a situation comes along that resonates that power person dynamic, then that mind energy, here's the capacity of the human mind, that the mind turns mind energy into not only physiology, but pictures. So whatever happened that's unresolved with the power person, a person comes along and resonates the power person dynamic. The power person dynamic is totally unconscious, and out of the unconscious comes a picture painted on the inside of our eyeballs, but which we believe we're seeing happen out there. And we're tricked by that picture into believing it actually happened out there. But what we're looking at is a reality in our mind generated by our brain. Yes, based on information coming in. Now, if you want to see a really good presentation on that, really a complete presentation that makes that crisp and clear from a scientific point of view, jump on YouTube and do a search for a TED Talk by a man named Anil, A-N-I-L, Seth, S-E-T-H. And Anil is a neuroscientist from a university in England. And this has been his life study and his life's work to show how the brain produces literally the world we think we see out there. And everything that we think we see out there is a projection of what we've not dealt with or not resolved in here whenever there's some form of hostility or fear moving. Now, that becomes the downfall of virtually every human being on the planet. Richard Feynman, this is one of my latest favorite quotes. You've heard me use it a time or two in the last couple of weeks. I just recently found Richard Feynman, who's a Nobel Prize winning physicist, says, "You must bend over backwards to criticize yourself, for you are the easiest one to fool." You must bend over backward to criticize yourself. In other words, you, as a normal human being, if you've never done any real work in your own mind, live in blockage of truth. And when the stress is up and the chips are down, rare is the person who honors truth. The non-being mind, and we're talking now here about what we call the mind of man, or information stored in carbon-based memory that's resonated into activity and creates our realities, the pictures in our minds. So those realities are coming from what we'll call the non-being mind. And it has one goal and one goal only, and that is to deceive and separate. All perception is a tyranny. And fear and or hostility pollute the very mechanism you rely on for what you call intelligence. And it pollutes the moral mechanism as well. And this tyranny is so, this tyranny of substituting past perception for the actuality of the moment is so profound that you've actually convinced yourself it is a gift. That's the game of the whole world. My perception is the gift. I know. Yes, I'm enraged, but I'm only enraged because of you. No, I'm only sad because of you. No, I'm only afraid because of you. No, I'm only in pain because of you. No, it's all about what you did. And that wonderful question that's on the worksheet, if they're the one with the problem, how can I possibly be the one with the pain? Obviously, if they're the one with the problem, they'd be the one with the pain. If I have pain and I think it's their problem, my tyranny is projecting what I've denied and dissociated from inside of me and put that into my brain's image of them, and I think they're the one with the problem. And I call that a gift. It's so devious. Again, listen to Richard Feynman. I just love this quote, just how he put it. You must bend over backwards to criticize yourself, for you are the easiest one to fool. Hostility and fear in any form felt within the human system means that this human is locked into perception. And as perception is all a lie, remember that lesson from the course, What is the World? And if you haven't watched that video, and this is fitting for and you want to get deeper into the brain cells, deeper into the understanding, jump on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and put in Michael Ryce, one word, MICHAELRYCE. Put in one word and go to the link to What is the World. It's about a 32-minute presentation. And it shows exactly how the mind is reproducing from the energetic dynamics absorbed from the power person, reproducing those dynamics in the form of perception. And again, you'll remember that lesson from Course in Miracles. What is the world? The world is false perception. It is born of error, and it has not left its source. It's inside of you. Why are you feeling the pain? Well, your mind's telling you that it's all about them, because the energy that's causing the pain, and pain is nothing but a warning signal to invite you to look inside yourself. The energy that's causing the pain is inside of you. And so this master, Yeshua, came along 2,000 years ago with a tool called forgiveness. Now, those who were living unconsciously in their tyranny turned the tool backward and made other people responsible for their tyranny. And then, and it's a joke when you really understand it, and then said, and I'll forgive you for it. I'll let you off the hook for the terror and trauma that's happening inside of me that I'm trying to project and convince you that you're responsible for. And you watch how many people get lost in the guilt and the fault and the blame and the terror of that. Hostility and fear signal that the mind is using internalized corrupt data to build the picture that is going to project onto the inside of your eyeballs. And you'll notice that you never project a disturbing picture on the inside of your eyeballs unless there's somebody in the world, maybe yourself, that's conflicting with or not fulfilling a goal that you hold for them. Now, people will say, oh, I'm upset because of this. And I say, okay, well, what's your goal for that? So notice that you're upset. You're not upset by that. You're upset because you have a goal. And here's what happens when you load a goal in the mind. It's loading a goal in the mind is kind of like loading a TV show into the memory bank of your TV set. Once it's there, it plays out. You load a goal in your mind, and that goal becomes a driver for resonating whatever is in the mind related to that goal. And yes, Dawn, we are live today. I apologize. I just saw your note. Oh, Jeanie did too. And I hear the comments, and in every projection that there is, and my invitation is for everybody to come back to. And remember, When I walk away from a situation where I feel conflicted, and I'm talking about them, I just lost the opportunity to heal my own mind. When I walk away from a situation, let's say it's a terrible, what everybody in the world would call a terribly disturbing situation, and I walk away from that situation talking to myself about why I am in pain and what my forgiveness work is, and I apply forgiveness to that pained energy in me, and I literally forgive, which means remove that energy. Once I have removed that energy, I can go back and I can look and see, wow, that situation really is terrible, but I'm not going to be in pain about it. Actually, I'm going to be an empowered human being living from a space of active present love. But if I can't live from a space of active present love, it's because that situation is resonating in me what I haven't dealt with. And, this applies to situations large and small. It can apply to the situation that happened when I looked out the backyard and, saw the cat attacking the bird and went into a fit of trauma and depression because the bird was eaten. I can do it with that. Or I could do it with something as big as what's going on in the world today. The key point to get is, and it's one of the key thoughts in the worksheet you'll remember, if I'm in pain, my thinking is in error. Doesn't mean I'm bad, doesn't mean I'm wrong, doesn't mean I'm guilty, doesn't mean any of the stuff that the world tells us. It just means that my mind is creating the world of perception out of corrupt data that never belonged within me in the first place. And until I take responsibility for that, I will live in a world of projection, and I'll find literally an endless procession of people. And as long as I'm in denial, and what's denial? When I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me. Well, I'm only feeling bad because you. Well, I'm feeling taken advantage of because you. I'm only hurting because they. That's all denial. If I'm hurting because I engage in energy that has no business being in my energy field. I've engaged in sin in the ancient Aramaic sense. Remembering that the word sin is an archery term. Doesn't have anything to do with the evil, the terrible, the awful, all the stuff the world is made out of. It's simply an archery term. When you fired at the target, you missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper yelled sin. You're off the mark. When I engage in energy, it's off the mark. Literally, when I think a thought, that thought, every time I think a thought, I create in my structure a literal neuropeptide, a molecule. That molecule is on its way to becoming part of my creative process. Probably the greatest atrocity, you heard me say this 1,000 times, the greatest atrocity done to us as human beings down through the ages and that we've bought into is that we've had hidden from us the fact that we are by nature creators. The first stage in our creative process is to think a thought, to entertain a thought, to entertain mind energy. Whether that mind energy comes out of the cell or out of the genes from the past, or it's something that I originate brand new here. When I originate a thought, that thought literally appears. If we had you in the laboratory and had the equipment to measure it, we would find that all of a sudden there is a neuropeptide, a natural molecule now inside of your energy field, or what we call a body. That molecule is going to circulate around in your energy field until it finds a cell with the receptor site that matches, and then it's going to land on the cell. Now, here's, to me, one of the most beautiful things about our creation, the fact that we are created beings, is that we were given this wonderful mechanism that when we are engaging in a creative process that is destructive to us, when that neuropeptide lands on the cell screams, ouch, depending how toxic, how disintegrative, how destructive, how big the sin is, the energy that's off the mark that lands on the cell responds with pain. And when it responds with pain, our world has taught us, I mean, think back to your power persons. How many times when you watch your power person in pain, did your power person get up and say, oh, I better go do some forgiveness work because I'm in a lot of pain and I know that I'm responsible for my pain. And gee, you know, I'm realizing this is just like the pain my power person had. I can remember actually both my grandfather and my great grandfather. I can remember when they did these same sorts of things. I think I need to. How many had that person in your life? I haven't met anybody yet. I've worked with ministers, or pardon me, the children of ministers, who this was the focal point of what the ministers were teaching, and the ministers still, when they weren't upset, talked about how their child was the problem. You make me so angry. You really upset me. You. When do we move into responsibility communication and go, oh, I just originated an energy that my cellular structure is telling me is damaging to my creative process. What's the signal? Any form of hostility or fear. Oh, Michael, I thought hostility or fear meant somebody out there was doing something to me. No, hostility or fear means you're doing something to yourself. And whatever the tyranny was that your power person inflicted on you, until you resolve it, when it's resonated into activity, you'll think the way to become God, i.e., your power person was your God. You look at a kid with a child. The way to become God is to be able to inflict that tyranny successfully on someone else. And that's the whole world of punishment. If I could just successfully inflict this tyranny, this wound on this person in front of me who's to blame, then I'd have the power of my power person and I would be God. And what that person is doing is putting a disintegrative energy, sin, literally into the chemistry of their cellular structure and destroying themselves. Remember, the wages of sin is death. It's not a theological threat. God's going to get you for your sins. God doesn't care about your sins. The church has made this whole big thing about God and sin. God doesn't even know your sins. That's all a man-made thing. One of the big sins, it's coming up in the culture a lot right now, and controlling women and men and genders and all that stuff. All that crap that men have made up. I mean, it's just an atrocity. But go back into the scriptures where the idea of obviously sexuality, naked body comes up. And what does the creator say? The creator says, who even told you were naked? Who made all that crap up? And until we go in and apply forgiveness to those energetic dynamics that create our hostility and our fear and our pain and are behind all of our projections, all of the images that our mind makes up, places on the inside of our eyeballs that somebody else is the offender. Again, we actually think that which pollutes our intellectual and moral mechanism is a strength. We actually think it's the kids talk about having these special powers. And yet, if you're playing out of a power person dynamic, again, let's review the few I mentioned earlier, to prove everyone's wrong and can't be trusted. Now, if you live in a world where your mind, your perceptual construct, and your stresses all relate to proving everyone else is wrong and they can't be trusted, then the message you had delivered to you from your power person is, you're wrong and you can't be trusted, And when you're under stress, that's the message you're going to deliver to the people in your life. Guaranteed 1,000%. Well, Michael, though, there was this one time when that, no, 1,000% of the time when hostility or fear is active and projecting images inside of your eyeballs that you pretend are outside of you, you're playing out the power person dynamic. And guess what happens when you say to people, you're wrong and can't be trusted? They feel just like you felt when that was being inflicted on you by your power person. If your power person played the game, I'm weak and helpless. You know, you'll see people who play this weak and helpless thing out. They're like, oh, I can't stand weak and helpless people. Why? Because I haven't resolved the power person dynamic, me, of being weak and helpless. And that person will talk about how, oh, you know, they just overwhelm me. They cause so much confusion in me. Well, that's total projection. That's dissociating from the real cause of what you're feeling. What was the third power person dynamic we talked about earlier? Going to fill the space with my voice to block out the truth. Talk, talk, talk. Not going to let anybody get a word in edgewise. Because if I slowed down enough, I'd have to look inside of me at what's going on. So the person who's always on the go, always filling the space with either projects, I got to do enough, got to do. You're not a human doing, you're a human being. Take at least some time for being. I know the world wants us all to be human doings. That's where the money is. But you're not a human doing, you're a human being. So if you need to fill the space with your voice to block out truth, stop, breathe. Take time every day to be in silence. And when you repeatedly tyrannize yourself by substituting past perceptions, that unresolved power person dynamic for the actuality of the moment, and then out of that you tyrannize others, you're doubling up the depth of the energy that you're inflicting on your own physiology. You're doubling up on the quote unquote sin. And you will never be forgiven for that. You don't want to be forgiven for that. Forgiveness has nothing to do with letting you off the hook. You know, we've got a whole lie going on in the culture of, you know, we've even seen bumper, I've been forgiven. You will never be forgiven because forgiven has got nothing to do with somebody judging you and letting you off the hook for what you did. Judgment Day, look at Yeshua, you know, they wanted him to judge and they wanted him to judge and they wanted so badly. What did he say? I mean, to the woman who was clearly caught, what did he say? First of all, everybody was pointing their finger. He knew they were in projection, so he showed them their projections. What did they all do? They left. And what did he say to the woman who was clearly, in the cultural sense of it, guilty? He delivered a message. Too bad Churchianity today wasn't delivering this message to the world. The message is, neither do I condemn thee. There has never and never will be any condemnation in him. And notice the church is still telling people about, well, on Judgment Day, he will. That's just a lie. It's a complete and total fraud. He will never condemn, and he will never forgive. Because forgiveness isn't about being let off the hook. If I've acquired an energy that I've walked into my tissue structure that's causing disease, I need forgiveness. That doesn't mean I need to be let off the hook. I need to engage in the tools that will open my energy field, that will allow the removal of that energy. That's the forgiveness process, the removal of what never belonged. So your wound is not a strength. It's not a gift. It's a devious tyranny in the mind that needs to be forgiven. And when you forgive it, then, that is when you apply forgiveness, the true forgiveness, which means you collapse the errant perception that's projecting the content of your own physiology into your brain's image of someone else. You collapse that, you open, and Carl Jung, I use this quote so often, it's so profoundly powerful, it fits right here. He says, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will run your life, and you will call it fate. What does forgiveness do? It collapses the picture painted on the inside of your eyeballs. When that picture collapses, it collapses in on its own footprint. When it collapses in on its own footprint, it gives you access to the underlying energy inside yourself that needs to be removed, that needs to be forgiven. And now, the power person dynamic will become a strength for you. You will become a healer of that dynamic in the world, because you will no longer be trapped in the generational pattern, literally the genetic patterns of that power person dynamic that has probably been going on in your bloodline for 1,000 years. And whatever it is you look at and you went, oh, I hated it when my mother, my father, my sister, my older sister, or whatever did this to me. That's the power person dynamic. And when it's forgiven, that is when the pain, sin energy, the energies that are off the mark, are removed from your tissue structure, you'll be able to stand the space of conscious, active, present love. And that strength is so needed by the world, because there's so many people who are just living out of that pain and trauma that just have no idea how to work through it. So when you give up the projection, how do you do it? Projection, pain content is funneled into making pictures in your mind by having a goal for someone or something. Forgiveness consists of removing that goal so that the projection that's showing up in the inside of your eyeballs collapses in on itself. You'll note that instantly in the worksheet process, once you cancel the goal that you held for the object of attention in that particular worksheet, you breathe and you invite the super processor in. Because when your perception collapses in on itself, by that action, you've opened the veil of your own temple. You've opened the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious mind. And now is the time when you ask, in Aramaic, Ruka de Kudsha, defined in English or translated into English as close as we can get it, as a feminine elemental force in us that, when invited into activity, undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. As long as you live in denial, no, that's the thing that upsets me. That's the thing that pains me. As long as I live in that world, my mind has been instructed by me to hide all evidence of my involvement in that situation. No, it's them. And now my mind hallucinates. My mind literally generates a picture out of that pain content that's in my cells, a picture of whoever the them is. And you'll notice that you had a them, depending on how many years you've been circling the earth, you had a then 2 years ago, you had a then yesterday, you had a then 4 weeks ago, you had a then 10 months ago, you had a then 10 years ago, you had a different then 20 years ago, and you had a different then 30 years ago, and a different 40, and a different 50 and 60 years ago. When do you catch on? Every time it's happened to you, you've been there. Your wound is not your strength until you heal it. Does that make sense? Your wound is not your strength until you heal it. And then, once healed, you are a gift to the world because you're empowered to heal. Oh, yes, you have a whole workshop by the title. Empowered to heal. Each piece of work that you do, you become, or you have the potential to become, the facilitator for the healing of whatever that issue is. Like you're uniquely empowered at that moment to be the space for anyone on the planet. And the deeper you go with that, the deeper the imprint you make on the planet of the possibility of healing that issue. But you've got to be careful of the great deceiver. And the great deceiver is perception. Again, it has only one goal. And its goal, it's like, it's not as if it made this goal up. It's just a device that's there for us, but we've given it its goals. And, you know, by the age of 4, virtually every one of us had bought into this goal. And that was, make sure that when I'm in pain, my mind shows me that somebody else is the problem. And so this non-being mind deceives and separates us from truth. And all of its perceptions are tyranny. They're all false constructs. They're all insane. And that action in the mind is the cause of all dis-ease in the so-called body. Recognizing that the body is an energy system that reflects whatever is locked into it. And I'm seeing that we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to just stop for a moment and see if anybody's out there with a thought for us. Question. You're most welcome, Lane. Delighted that you're with us. Jolynn, why am I hearing from you again? All right. Cool. Nice to be checking in with everybody. Susan, it sounds like you're doing another monstrous, giant piece of work. And am I talking about the state of our country, or am I talking about the state of our minds? Remember, the non-being mind deceives and separates. Go back and listen to that lesson from What is the World? The world is false perception. It is born of error. It has not left its source. It will remain no longer than the thought, the neuropeptide that gave it birth, is cherished. That single error creates a whole world, the world of perception. And the purpose of the world of perception is to take the place of what the Creator gave you in creation. And so, Buffy, you asked the question, can we cancel our need to be right about those people, whoever those people are? Well, here's the thing. If that's the core goal that's driving your pain perception, then that's going to be healing for you. But if the core goal is, I want them, let's say, for instance, I want them to treat me lovingly, gently, and with respect, then canceling the goal for our need to be right isn't going to heal whatever the issue is. It's really important that you identify the precise goal that's driving this construct of the mind. So, and you ask about what if perception is inaccurate. Any perception where there is even the slightest hostility or fear is inaccurate. That's the only measuring stick. You don't need to go out and figure out, am I right about this, or are they right, or who? If there's any form of hostility or fear moving in me, then my perception is inaccurate. And what I want to do is I want to look specifically in this situation. And, you know, in a given situation, I mean, we could have 100 different people in precisely identical situations, but there are 100 different goals involved. And if person 1 cancels the goal that person 100 had in that situation, it wouldn't benefit them. This is one of the skills that needs to be acquired in doing the forgiveness, the reality management worksheet process. Is you need to really be looking at, and this is another deception the mind will do anything to lead you away from dealing with that, because that's how the mind's been trained, in denial and blame. So developing the skill to really identify the goal that's really driving this pain perception is key, because again, it could be 100 different goals involved, but only the one. See, imagine the structure. It's like you've got a file cabinet. All of the information in your mind is in files, so to speak, with all like information. If I load a goal, let's say, I want this person to treat me lovingly, gently, and with respect. So that would resonate the file on how I'm treated. And let's say this person is raging. So I could say, well, I want them to stop raging. Well, that's nice, but that isn't going to open the file on how I get treated. It's only the goals that I hold around how I get treated. When I cancel those, that I'm going to collapse that perception. And a good visual, it's not a very nice picture, but it is something we all can identify with, because we've all seen it probably too many times. But you remember 9/11, the planes hit the towers and the towers dropped into their own footprint. That's kind of what forgiveness does to false perception, to perception based in any form of hostility or fear. When I find the right goal, I found the device that causes my perception to collapse into its own footprint. Now that it's dropped into its own footprint, just like those buildings did, I now have access to that part of my unconscious. And the unconscious is massive. I mean, literally, if we took every crazy supercomputer in the world and hooked them all together, we would not have probably 1% of the processing power of one human body-mind unit. So I need to be, and it's a practice, it's just a practice. I need to be specific with the goal that I hold, and canceling that goal to heal my specific pain, my dissociated pain. And then when I heal that dissociated pain, that's where the wound turns into the gift. That's when I become one who's capable of being the space for healing, whatever that wound is. And, wounds have the mass of humanity, most are carrying the same wounds. Who's going to be big enough to take responsibility and make the breakthrough? Remember, Yeshua comes out of the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's done his wound work. He's healed his wound. I mean, his healing crisis was so deep that he sweat blood. As a naturopathic physician, if I saw somebody sweating blood in that situation who was breathing and doing the work, I'd say that's a major piece of healing. So notice he walks out from the Garden of Gethsemane, and there's Peter with a sword in his hand trying to hack off the high priest's servant's ear. What does Yeshua say to Peter? He says, Peter, he says, get behind me, Satan. He calls Peter Satan. And he describes what he means by that. He says, for you think in the mind of man rather than the plan of God. He's saying you're stuck in your carbon-based memory perceptual wound, and you're refusing to deal with it. And if you use this device, this attack weapon, this sword, to try to get yourself out of it, that literally is going to be the energy that will ultimately be your demise. It's what will destroy you. So he says, get behind me. He gives him that instruction. And then the high priest servant, who he knows is going to literally, physiologically have him torn to shreds, he does what a human being would do. Not what a vengeful, pained, frightened man or woman would do. He does what an actual human being would do. There's the archenemy who's been wounded, had his ear cut off, and Yeshua does what a human would do, and he offers his archenemy healing. Now, I've had people who've listened to me interpret that way, and I say, well, Michael, I hear that, but didn't look very bright because he noticed that doing that got him dead. And I say, yes, I noticed doing that got him dead. Have you noticed they couldn't keep him that way? He wasn't, churchianity has turned this whole thing into suffering and death, and it's all about, the suffering game. But Yeshua, standing as a space of love, offering healing to the archenemy, was functioning, restored to his human life, freed from the trauma that he bled out in the Garden of Gethsemane. And they couldn't kill him. And when you ask about the worst of humanity running the world, what does that bring up to you, in you? What am I trying to avoid? If I'm trying to avoid, remember, mind energy becomes flesh. Focusing is a creative act. Remember, Yeshua says, "Let thine eye be single, and thy body will be filled with light." If you talk to the physiologist, physicist today, and you ask them what matter is, they'll tell you that matter is light energy in form. A single eye, a single focus on one piece of mind energy, the exclusion of all else, that is literally going to become, this is the creative process, that's going to become your physiology and appear in your world. So that's how creation occurs. If I'm putting creative energy in and my system goes, ouch, pain, trauma, hurt, then I'm going to try to avoid what I think is the cause of that pain, trauma, and hurt, because it's somebody or something out there. No, the cause of the pain, trauma, or hurt is in here. And when I go in here and I bring whatever that is to active present love, I'm freed of it. And when I'm freed, then I open the space for the world to be freed. Okay, Don, Don's pointing out nobody knows a great computer. Oh yeah, they're supercomputers. And our capacity as human beings is way, way beyond what the whole world filled with them if they were all hooked together. When we literally introduce our own physiology, and when you do, there will be such a light, there will be such a just profound physiological experience of love that it's beyond imaginable. And when you create your life from that state of that profound physiological presence of love, you've gotten out of resistance to the world and you've stepped into being a conscious co-creator. And what the world needs now is those who function as conscious co-creators. Because 50% of the country is in resistance to the insanity. When you are, remember Yeshua said, resist not evil. When you are in resistance to an energy, you are a contributor to it. When you bring active present love to it, active present love is the master solvent and dissolves that which is out of order in the creation. So thank you all for joining us. Time's up, and delight to have you with us. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an honor.